Hollywood once witnessed men who were celebrated as the perfect embodiment of a true gentleman. With deep, warm voices, captivating eyes, and flawless appearances, they had the power to make millions of female audiences swoon during the 1950s. Yet few knew that to attain such dazzling glory, they had to pay with their very own bodies. Some were forced to strip right inside a hotel room. Some had to serve cocktails in the middle of the night, which in reality meant performing humiliating extra services. And there were also those who became victims of hidden cameras, were blackmailed, and were compelled to live their entire lives in silence, haunted by the fear that a single leak could shatter their careers. Statistics show that at least 25 of Hollywood's top male stars endured such degrading exchanges. They were all A-list celebrities' golden faces once honored on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So who were they? Why would these A-listers, people who seem to have everything, be forced to sell their bodies from the very first steps of their careers? The answers will be revealed in today's video. 1. James Dean, The Rebel Angel and the Deals in the Shadows. Hollywood summer of 1951. James Dean. A 20-year-old young man who had just left Indiana for Los Angeles, knew no one, had no money in his pocket, and had not received a single audition invitation. The only things he possessed were a distinctive face and a kind of innocence that made him easy to control. Those very traits caught the attention of secret talent scouts at the Chateau Marmont Hotel, a place famously known as the after-hours casting room reserved for the powerful moguls of the entertainment industry. According to a bartender at the lobby bar, Dean once attended a private party where young men were not called by their real names, but only by assigned numbers. Dean was number 6. He had sad eyes and tousled curly hair that made him especially well-liked. But most importantly, he stayed silent, asked no questions, and never resisted. The first person to bring Dean out of the shadows was Rogers Brackett, a seasoned stage director from New York. Brackett was not only a lover, but also a career mentor. However, the price Dean had to pay was far from small. Actress Christine White, who lived near Brackett's apartment at the time, recalled, "I heard Dean crying in the bathroom at 3 in the morning many times. Yet the next morning he would still show up on set with a face that betrayed no sign of a terrible night." Step by step, Dean's career began to rise after nights of escorting by request. He was taken to lavish parties, serving cocktails, and even providing services that were never on the menu. On one occasion, he was asked to spend the night with an older investor in exchange for a television role at CBS, and Dean did not refuse. He knew all too well that as soon as he appeared on screen, he would no longer have to wash dishes at a diner near Sunset Boulevard. A close friend of Dean, now deceased, revealed that Dean had once been secretly filmed in a penthouse on Wilshire Boulevard while privately serving a studio executive. That tape later became a tool of blackmail, ensuring Dean could never escape the web of power that ensnared him. From that moment on, Dean gradually lost control over his own life. The clothes he wore, the places he appeared, and even the people he dated were all arranged by a group of nameless, faceless advisors. Many believe this group was the very reason Dean became increasingly withdrawn, cold, and constantly suspicious, as if someone was watching him every single day. Dean had traded his body for fame, but what he received was not lasting glory. After just 3 brief roles that cemented his name as an A-list star, Dean's life came to an end in a mysterious car crash in 1955 when his career had only just begun. 2. Marlon Brando, the man who was never afraid to trade his body for a role. At a press party in 1975, Brando once bluntly declared, "I am willing to sleep with anyone who can give me a role. Male or female, it doesn't matter as long as they hold the power." That statement, quoted by Vanity Fair in a special profile on him in 2001, became a vivid testament to the dark underbelly of American cinema. In the 1940s, Brando was hustling on small stages in New York. At that time, a veteran director named George Cukor bought Brando for $300 a week in exchange for nights of private line rehearsals in his luxurious Beverly Hills apartment. It was also Cukor who later phoned and introduced Brando to Elia Kazan, the director who placed in his hands the legendary role of Stanley Kowalski in A Streetcar Named Desire. But Brando didn't stop at just one relationship. He got involved with directors, producers, even journalists, as long as they could help him advance. In a personal diary leaked after his death, Brando listed the names of 14 men who had helped him with both their bodies and their money. Among them was Jack Warner, the tycoon of Warner Brothers who stepped in to rescue Brando from a sex scandal in 1953, so he could go on to appear in Julius Caesar. However, not everyone who took that path ended up like Brando. There was one man who tried to do the same, who was mentored by Brando, who entered the same dark rooms, but never got the chance to walk out. Sal Mineo, the star murdered for a past that could never be buried. Sal Mineo, the handsome actor who played James Dean's best friend in Rebel Without a Cause, was a phenomenon that flared up and burned out quickly. But behind that glory was a past he was never allowed to speak of. In 1955, at just 16 years old, Sal was invited to the private home of a famous producer for private line rehearsals. Later, he told a friend they said I'd get the role if I knew how to make them believe I was soft enough. That night, Sal stayed over, and the next morning his name appeared on the official audition list for Rebel. Sal never denied this. In a 1973 interview cut from the television broadcast, he openly said, "In Hollywood, if you don't please them, they won't even remember your name." After James Dean's death, Sal was swept into a whirlpool with no way out, used, abandoned, and forced to return to selling his body to survive. According to an investigation by The Advocate, there was a time when Mineo took private orders to serve 2 directors in Palm Springs in exchange for bit parts in B-grade movies. By the late 1960s, Sal tried to rebuild his life, directing plays, joining independent art projects, and beginning to speak out about Hollywood's dark side. A week before he was murdered, he told a CBS reporter, "I have names, I have pictures, I have recordings. If I die, find those things." On February 12, 1976, Sal Mineo was stabbed to death right outside his West Hollywood apartment. Police concluded it was a robbery. Yet strangely, his wallet was not taken. His watch was still on his wrist, and his briefcase, believed to contain all the evidence Sal intended to reveal, vanished without a trace. The death of Sal Mineo was like a chilling warning. Some truths, if spoken aloud, will take your life before the public ever hears them. And among those who once stepped out of the shadows with him was another star, more handsome, more famous, who had to live his entire life in denial and in fear of his true identity being exposed. Rock Hudson, the companion at private parties. Rock Hudson was not only a silver screen icon, he was also considered a luxury gift at parties no ordinary audience member had ever witnessed. From the early 1950s, when he first arrived at Universal Rock, was placed by Henry Wilson, one of the most powerful managers in Hollywood, infamous for training actors from the bedroom on the list of potential pretty boys. Hudson had a chiseled, statuesque body, a cinematic face, and a deep, warm voice. But the reason he was chosen had nothing to do with acting talent. In a studio file leaked in 1989, a former assistant of Wilson handwrote, "He's obedient, well-mannered, and always ready to go with a client the moment I nod." Within the industry, Hudson was known as the ideal companion, never asking in advance who he would meet, never refusing an invitation. From the Beverly Hills Hotel to villas in Palm Springs, Hudson would always appear with a courteous smile, pouring drinks, making light conversation, and when necessary, stepping into a bedroom without another question. An audio recording of a conversation between Henry Wilson and producer Ross Hunter, made public in full service by Scotty Bowers, once revealed, "He can take care of 2 people in one night, as long as no photos are taken. How long it lasts is up to them." When Hudson shot to fame with Pillow Talk and Magnificent Obsession, he became the center of media attention. and also the most expensive merchandise at the fundraising parties of Hollywood tycoons. Rumor had it that each time Hudson attended a private party, the studio secured secret sponsorships worth millions of dollars. No one knows exactly how many people he was involved with, but among the belongings found after his death was a small scrap of paper scrawled with the words, "I was never allowed to say no." But Hudson was not alone, because his former companion, a gentleman who seemed the very image of perfection, elegance, and sophistication in Hollywood, had also survived in the same way, the only difference being he was far more discreet. 5. Carrie Grant, the perfect gentleman and nights spent with strangers. The fifth name on the list is Carrie Grant, once hailed by the press as the kind of man every woman wishes to marry. Yet behind that glamorous title lay a truth entirely at odds with the image. For nearly the first 20 years of his career, Grant lived with fellow actor Randolph Scott, a relationship that magazines of the time coyly described as inseparable friends. At their Malibu Beach mansion, the two frequently hosted private parties for directors, screenwriters, and benefactors. According to Scotty Bowers, famous for his role as a handsome man, broker for the elite, Grant was not only the host, but also directly coordinated secret exchanges behind closed doors. One cinematographer once recounted that on one occasion, Grant invited 3 directors over, then disappeared with them into a locked upstairs room. Just a week later, he landed the lead role in the film Bringing Up Baby. It didn't stop there. One leaked letter from Columbia Pictures in 1942 explicitly noted Grant's absolute compliance in participating in after-hours activities arranged by the studio, including assisting the studio's close financial partners. Even after becoming a famous star, Grant could not break free. In 1955, Confidential magazine investigated an incident where he was seen leaving the Biltmore Hotel at 2 a.m. with an unnamed European sponsor, just days before signing on to star in To Catch a Thief with Alfred Hitchcock. Perhaps that's why, despite marrying 5 times, Grant never truly committed to anyone. When surrounded by rumors, he always chose silence. For more than anyone, he understood that silence was the only shield that could keep him alive in a Hollywood full of traps. 6. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, once kept by men. The 6th spot belongs to Clark Gable. Before transforming into the dashing Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind and earning the title the King of Hollywood, Gable was once a young gigolo serving middle-aged gentlemen in Oregon. In 1922, at just 21 years old, Gable was kicked out of his home for dropping out of school and lacking a stable job. Homeless and wandering, he was taken in by William H. Wright, a famous gay playwright, under the pretense of being his theater student. In reality, Wright provided Gable with everything: clothes, lodging, spending money in exchange for the young man's complete obedience. A former neighbor of Wright's recalled in a memoir published in 1978, every Friday night, Mr. Wright would host guests, and Clark would walk around with a tray of drinks, smiling charmingly and knowing exactly when to slip away into the private room. After Wright died of a stroke, Gable moved to Los Angeles, bringing along the connections from his former patron. According to internal MGM records, there was an instance where a powerful director bailed Gable out of a same-sex scandal with a critic so that he could continue auditioning for The Painted Desert, the film that opened the door to Hollywood for him. MGM mogul Louis B. Mayer once quipped, "Gable knows very well the price of a suit and the price you pay to wear it on the red carpet." Even at the height of his fame, Gable maintained a murky relationship with George Cukor, the gay director of Gone with the Wind. Rumors claimed Gable was the one who influenced Cukor's removal from the project, fearing he might expose their shared past. While Gable chose to bury his secret, the next figure was the kind of man willing to compromise every night, as long as he could remain on stage, whether that stage was under the spotlight or in a bedroom. 7. Gene Kelly, the dance legend and steps taken in the shadows. Before fame, Kelly was a dance instructor in Pittsburgh. In 1937, he left his hometown for New York with 2 suitcases and a notebook, filled with the names of patrons recommended by former students. One of the first people Kelly met was renowned choreographer Charles Weidman, who brought him into a private training group lasting 6 months, which was in reality a disguised sexual audition circuit for Broadway producers. Another participant from that group later told Movie Line magazine, "We never actually trained. They judged us on our bodies, our obedience, and our flexibility, both on the stage and in bed." Kelly passed that audition and was introduced to director Stanley Donen, who became a close collaborator, and, according to many rumors, Kelly's secret lover for nearly a decade. Even after becoming famous, Kelly could not escape this cycle. Studios often pressured him to attend private meet-and-greet events with sponsors. A former Variety reporter once said Gene Kelly danced all night at a mansion in Bel Air. But that night, there were no cameras, no stage, just 3 powerful men and a contract waiting to be signed. In a 1959 letter to a close friend, Kelly once wrote, "They want me to dance for them, but they never ask if I'm tired, if I'm sad, or if I'm disgusted with myself." Perhaps that's why beyond the stage lights, Gene Kelly always sought the shelter of closed rooms, avoided mirrors in the hallways, and walked quietly through the midnight streets. 8. Tony Curtis. Perfect beauty and roles traded for the body. Tony Curtis was once the embodiment of the Hollywood dream, a captivating face, a dashing figure, and a smile capable of silencing any casting room. But behind that glittering facade, Curtis once whispered to a co-star, "To get to act in movies, I've done many things that were never in the script." In 1948, the young man from the Bronx walked into a casting room at Universal. After only a few minutes of conversation, an older producer said bluntly, "I think you could be a star. But first, tell me, are you obedient?" That question was by no means small talk. According to journalist Robert Hoffler, author of The Man Who Invented Rock Hudson, Curtis once spent an entire week in the private apartment of a casting executive in exchange for the opportunity to appear in Crisscross 1949, the first role that caught the attention of the film industry. Curtis never denied those nights. In an interview cut from the 1990 broadcast, he said, "Frankly, I knew what I could do with this face. When I was young, that was the most valuable commodity I had." When he took the lead role in Some Like It Hot, the press hailed him as the heartthrob of the century. Yet in his diary, Curtis once wrote, "If people knew what I had to trade to get this role, they probably wouldn't think I was so sweet anymore." 9. Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates, and the Price of a Role. Anthony Perkins was once the young man adored by all of Hollywood. With dreamy eyes, a slender frame, and a timid voice, he was the kind of figure every director wanted to reshape to their liking. Before becoming Norman Bates in Psycho, Perkins spent a time wandering New York, surviving on pre-arranged hotel dates at the Commodore. One of his regular clients was Roy Cohn, one of the most powerful lawyers of the time, who often introduced Perkins to media moguls whenever they needed a well-mannered, educated young man to entertain guests. An anonymous figure in the entertainment industry once told Confidential in 1965 Perkins was a rare find. He made people feel special, and in return, they gave him roles. Alfred Hitchcock was said to have bought Perkins from another studio with a contract that included an unspoken clause Perkins would keep intimate company throughout the making of Psycho. In private letters to a former lover, only revealed in 2007, Perkins wrote, "I'm not afraid to die for a role. I'm only afraid that people will know I had to slowly die inside to be allowed to play it." After Psycho, Perkins found himself boxed in, not only in his career, but in his life. In 1972, he sought out a therapist and admitted, "I'm no longer myself. I've become a deal, a gift that gets traded." 10. Dennis Hopper, the rebel player and the price of keeping a role. Dennis Hopper, the rebellious icon of the gritty, defiant new Hollywood wave, had once been an idealistic young man. But he himself admitted, "I sold my soul" for a supporting role and a night in Beverly Hills. In the mid-1960s, Hopper was unemployed. blacklisted from many projects for his bad reputation, unruly, violent, and entangled with drugs. One night, he accepted an invitation to a secret casting party at a mansion on Mulholland Drive, where men like him could trade a bed for a chance to return to the screen. According to the memoirs of director Nicholas Ray at that party, Hopper was willing to serve an older patron all night in exchange for a supporting role in The Sons of Katie Elder, 1965, the film that put him back on the radar of the studios. Brooke Hayward, Hopper's former girlfriend, once said Dennis accepted everything, even having his dignity trampled, as long as it meant standing in front of the camera again. The price did not stop there. In a 1983 conversation with Rolling Stone, Hopper confessed, "I used to be a bad person. But before that, I was just a good boy who had to serve rich men to do what I loved, the limits of the trade-off." For the next figure once called America's Golden Boy, and someone no one thought would ever fall, became proof that sometimes you don't just sell yourself once, but sell yourself off piece by piece, night by night, until there is nothing left to hold on to. 11 Rudolph Valentino, from the first Latin lover to nights of selling his body for money. Rudolph Valentino, Hollywood's first image of suave elegance, was affectionately called the Latin lover across America. Yet few people know that before becoming the man women pursued with feverish passion, he once had to serve other men just to survive. According to the biography written by Emily Leiter in 2003, when Valentino was working as a waiter in New York, he was fired for being too intimate with male customers. Not long after, he was introduced to a secret male dancer club called Maxim, where wealthy gentlemen could book an attractive young man for the entire night at a rate of $50 per time. An old acquaintance once told the Brooklyn Eagle. He never really wanted to do this, but when he was threatened with being reported to the police for illegal residency, Valentino had no choice but to agree. From then on, almost every week, someone would take him back to their private apartment. It was one of these regular clients, the producer Norman Carey, who brought Valentino to California and introduced him to a supporting role in The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, 1921. That role turned him into an idol for millions of fans. But what was the price he had to pay? In a handwritten letter discovered after Valentino's death, he once wrote, "The whole world calls me a lover. But on the first night, I just lay there, and no one even kissed me." 12th, Tyrone Power. Beauty in Hollywood has never been free. Tyrone Power was dubbed the face of American cinema in the 1940s. He made women swoon and men envy him. But what few knew was that Power had long understood that in Hollywood, beauty was not a gift from heaven, it was something to be traded for opportunity. In 1936, before signing a contract with 20th Century Fox, Power accepted an invitation to Palm Springs to vacation with an older producer, who would later appear in FBI records for allegedly casting actors through late-night parties. An employee who worked there recounted to journalist William Mann Power was asked to try on swimwear, and then to try out his level of submission. The very next night, he received an offer for a 5-year contract. And it didn't stop there. For many years, Power's schedule was kept full by Hollywood tycoons whenever he wasn't filming. Each time he appeared at the Brown Derby nightclub, rumors swirled that he was paying off debts with charm. Power's close friend actor Cesar Romero once told the press Tyrone understood that to keep that position he had to save face at all costs. And that cost sometimes was never telling the truth. But not everyone could keep their dignity. Some, like Montgomery Clift, traded everything for fame, then spent the rest of their lives tormented by the memory of those first nights when they had to lie down just to have their name on the casting list. 13. Montgomery Clift. The sad eyes of a man who once sold himself. In front of the camera, Montgomery Clift never smiled for long. His eyes always carried a distant sorrow, as if they didn't belong to this world. And indeed, Hollywood, that world, was a place where he had once sold himself just to land a supporting role. According to records kept in Elizabeth Taylor's diary, Clift once admitted that early in his career, he was introduced by an acquaintance to meet a stage director in exchange for a role. When Taylor asked if he regretted it, Clift simply replied, "No. But every time I remember, I feel like a part of me died." In 1945, when he was still an unknown name, Clift accepted a private audition invitation at a Bel Air mansion where the famous director Joshua Logan was looking for a new face. After the audition, Clift stayed there for 3 days. An elderly housekeeper recalled in Clift the Untold Story he cried a lot. But when he left in his hand was a contract. When he became famous, Clift always avoided questions about the start of his career. To a reporter from Variety, he said, "I started on the stage, and in a few rooms that had no audience." At the end of his life, Clift lived in loneliness, addicted to alcohol, and passed away with a crooked smile. No one knew what secrets he took to the grave. Only one contemporary of his, a man who once made an entire generation of schoolgirls swoon, ever said, "I lay beside someone I didn't love to live with a role that I myself had no right to choose." 14. Tab Hunter, teenage idol and the secrets no one was allowed to know. The next name on the list is Tab Hunter. In the 1950s, the radiance of Tab Hunter was almost impossible to surpass. He was the golden boy with a dazzling smile and a sculpted physique. Yet hidden behind that sparkling idol image was a truth Hunter had to quietly conceal for nearly half of his life. In 1950, at just 19 years old, Hunter was arrested for attending a gay party that was deemed illegal in Long Beach. This incident nearly caused his career to vanish into thin air. But an unnamed, powerful producer stepped in not with money but with an exclusive 5-year agreement. Whenever someone brought up that scandal from back then, Hunter would simply smile faintly and say with a hint of mystery, "I didn't lose anything at all, it's just I had to spend the night with someone I couldn't refuse." At the height of his fame, Hunter was forced to sign fake romantic contracts with a series of young female stars from Natalie Wood to Debbie Reynolds, solely to cover up the real relationships happening behind the scenes. Later in his memoir, Tab confessed, "I wasn't chosen for my acting ability, but because I knew how to stay quiet and had exactly the kind of looks Hollywood wanted." But Hunter wasn't the only one who had to live a double life. The next person once made millions of hearts flutter with the image of a doctor on the small screen, but in real life was a completely different man. 15. Richard Chamberlain, the television doctor and a double life. In 1961, with his role as Dr. Kildare in NBC's hit series of the same name, Richard Chamberlain became the dream lover of millions of female viewers. But behind the stage lights, he lived in constant fear, afraid the truth about his sexuality would be exposed, afraid his career would collapse over a single leaked intimate photo. An assistant who had once worked with Chamberlain told Hollywood Insider magazine he never left the set with his lover. Every meeting took place in his private apartment windows, always shut tight, curtains drawn, and the phone unplugged. Chamberlain was also forced to attend casting sessions that took place at midnight in Beverly Hills, attended by directors, producers, and even media figures who would evaluate candidates not through acting, but through their bodies. There was even a time when he was told to have private time with the head of a television network before being approved for a new role. Once, when a male co-star suggested going public with their relationship, Chamberlain coldly replied, "If I lose a role because I love you, can you afford to support me?" He wore the mask of the perfect gentleman for over 40 years, only daring to admit everything after retirement. But there were still people like Troy Donaghue who didn't even get the chance to wear the mask because for them, survival itself was the only goal. 16. Troy Donaghue, teenage heartthrob in the midnight casting parties. With his golden blonde hair, Troy Donaghue was once the nation's heartthrob of the 1960s. But when the stage lights went out, he didn't go home. Instead, Donaghue appeared at private parties where selection didn't happen on the casting floor, but behind closed doors. In 1958, at a party on Mulholland Drive, Donaghue was called into a room where director Jack Warner and two sponsors were already waiting. According to a server present that night, just 30 minutes later, he walked out, pale-faced, drained of color. I didn't act at all. They only asked to see my body without clothes. The very next night, Donaghue unexpectedly received a 7-year contract with Warner Bros. But from then on, every appearance he made on screen came with a steep price. In a leaked diary, Donaghue wrote, "Every time I made a film, I had to give up a part of myself. A few years later, I had nothing left except the image they had built for me." His career spiraled into addiction, and he lost everything dying alone in 2001. At least, he had once tasted glory. The next figure didn't even get the choice for him, the only aim was survival. 17. Van Johnson, the boy next door and the price paid to afford rent. Van Johnson was once the embodiment of the nice boy next door in MGM films of the 1940s. But the truth off-screen was entirely different. Johnson once had to sleep on the floor of a warehouse and survive on borrowed money just to buy food. One day, director George Cukor happened to meet Johnson at a cheap diner in Melrose. After a brief exchange, Cukor said something that brought Van to tears. "I don't need you to act. I just need you to be good and know your place." That night, Johnson was invited to Cukor's mansion. The audition took place in the bedroom. The next morning, Van held in his hand a real audition contract, along with enough money to cover 3 months' rent. Later, during a drinking session, Johnson told a friend, "I don't feel proud at all. But I didn't want to go back to sleeping on a park bench. Around here, no one asks who you are, only whether you'll go along with it." From the boy next door, Johnson became a star. But there were still those who, no matter how beautiful they were, could never escape the shadow of those first nights when they were forced to trade their bodies just to survive. 18. George Maharis, the TV star whose glory collapsed over misconduct. In the early 1960s, George Maharis was television's golden boy in America, leaving a deep mark with his role as Buzz Murdoch in the series Route 66. His dashing look, strong demeanor, and magnetic masculinity made him an idol women swooned over and men envied. But on one November night in 1967, all that glamour vanished in an instant, following a single headline on the front page of the Los Angeles Times TV actor arrested in public restroom for indecent behavior. The story was quickly buried, but court records show that Maharis was caught engaging in intimate conduct with an undercover Los Angeles Police Department officer in the restroom of the Westwood Hotel. The incident not only fueled speculation about his sexual orientation, but also led film studios to turn their backs on him immediately. A director who had once worked with Maharis shared in an interview from the start, everyone knew he wasn't chosen for his acting. He was good-looking, and he knew it. After the scandal, Maharis virtually vanished from the screen. He lived in seclusion, avoided all interviews, stayed away from the public eye, and never spoke of that fateful night again. 19. John Gavin, the clean face and the dirty encounters behind it. In the late 1950s, John Gavin was dubbed the cleanest face in Hollywood. His impeccable looks, gentlemanly demeanor, and spotless military record made him the top choice for roles as heroes, aristocrats, or officers. Yet behind that polished image was a string of encounters with strangers that audiences never knew about. In a quietly released 1984 memoir, a limousine driver for Universal revealed, "Usually around midnight, I'd drive Gavin to an apartment in Santa Monica. There, he'd meet men in tuxedos, none of whom gave their names. An hour later, he'd walk out with a blank expression and just say, 'Take me home. I need a shower.'" Thanks to those meetings, Gavin always had contracts in hand even when scripts weren't finished. Major roles were lined up for him without any auditions. A Universal executive once admitted he was the perfect front to hide all the filth we were doing behind the scenes. At least Gavin lived to walk away from the muck. The next star, Raone Navaro, was not so lucky he lost his life on the very bed that had been bought with his youth and beauty. 20. Raone Navaro, the silver screen legend who fell on a stranger's bed. On October 31, 1968, police found Raone Navaro dead in bed at his Laurel Canyon mansion. His neck had been strangled with a telephone cord, his mouth stuffed with tissues, and dried blood was scattered around the scene. The culprits were brothers Paul and Tom Ferguson. Young male escorts summoned over the phone believing Navaro had hidden cash in the house. The case grew darker when the press unearthed a list of special clients who had been involved with Navaro during the 1930s, 1950s, including directors, politicians, and A-list stars. One of them testified in court. I met him when I was just 17. He said, "As long as you behave, I'll put you in a movie." And he kept his word. For years, Navaro survived by selling his body under an alias. But in the end, even as a legend, he died in loneliness and disgrace like a corpse no one wanted to claim. In stark contrast to Navaro's tragic death, the next figure fell into the trap of a love affair, a love the world would never accept. The price was an entire life spent in the shadows. 21. Farley Granger, the innocent boy and his hidden romance. Farley Granger rose to fame from Hitchcock's Rope 1948 and continued to win audiences over with his gentle face, shy eyes, and distinctive tenderness. Yet behind that fragile exterior was a life driven by desire and fear. In 1950, Granger entered a power-driven relationship with screenwriter Arthur Lawrence, a man who controlled every step of his career. In his memoir, Include Me Out, Granger admitted, "Arthur taught me how to love, how to pretend, and how to lie down when I needed to keep a role." The relationship lasted over 15 years, but within the industry, it was never openly discussed. Every time Granger landed a new role, rumors swirled. Who did he spend the night with this week? A production assistant was even fired for joking about it on the Strangers on a Train set. Granger never denied, nor did he confirm. In one of his final interviews, he said, "I loved, I was used, but I have no regrets." Because in this world, if you don't let them touch your body, they'll never let you touch the spotlight. 22. Don Murray, the quiet face. Behind off-script deals, Don Murray was not a name mentioned as often as the legends of his time. Yet he once managed to make Marilyn Monroe blush with embarrassment when acting alongside her in Bus Stop 1956. His dignified appearance, composed gaze, and gentle demeanor led many to believe he was the epitome of an old-fashioned gentleman. However, few knew that behind that respectable exterior lay a past filled with deals that were never put down on paper. According to the unpublished memoir of a casting assistant at 20th Century Fox, Murray was once forced to use his body in exchange for his first film contract. He went into an audition room with a famous director. 2 hours later, he came out his face pale. When I asked if he was all right, he simply said, "I think I just sold my soul to get in front of a camera." Murray never officially confirmed this story, but he also never denied it. In a 1982 interview, he made a cryptic remark. "In Hollywood, there are things that never make it into a contract, but everyone knows what they have to do if they want their name on one." Unlike Murray, who chose silence, the next man was far less discreet. On screen, he was America's cowboy, but off-screen, he served far more dinners than he ever had roles. 23. Guy Madison, the silver screen cowboy who served the elites dinners. Guy Madison, with his handsome face and perfect teeth, was once considered the ideal model of American manhood when he portrayed Wild Bill Hickok. But before fame found him, he was an unemployed Navy sailor struggling to survive in Los Angeles. The place that allowed him to hold on in Hollywood was not a film set, but the kitchens of the wealthy elite's mansions. According to a former employee of the Beverly Hills Hotel, where tycoons often booked rooms for private dinners, Madison was hired not only to serve food, but also to act as a living decoration for the event guests would request that he serve shirtless stand still like a statue for the first 20 minutes, and then disappear into the host's bedroom. An anonymous director once wrote in his memoir, "Guy never minded." He was good-looking, knew his role, and I saw him smile when handed a room key as if it was something he'd long grown used to. After becoming a star, Madison rarely spoke of that earlier chapter in his life, but Hollywood never forgot, especially those who had seen him in a hotel bathroom at 3 in the morning. 24. William Haynes, the man who refused to bow yet once lived off his body. William Haynes was MGM's most popular romantic comedy star in the late 1920s, and also one of the few male actors to be openly gay. Before daring to live his truth, he had quietly sold himself to support both himself and his lover. In 1933, Variety reported that when Haynes was caught in a hotel with a young man, he did not apologize. He told the press outright, "I love him. I will not give him up." Few knew that when he first set foot in Hollywood, Haynes worked at exclusive private clubs, places where only men with an invitation could enter. A close friend recalled Bill once said, "I didn't work there for the money. I worked there to be seen, to be introduced, to be chosen." After the scandal, MGM fired him. Haynes reinvented himself as a celebrated interior designer. Yet, toward the end of his life, he still uttered a bittersweet confession, "I don't regret loving. But I do regret having to sell that love to buy back my career." Not everyone was as fortunate as Haynes. One man not only sold himself, but also became the broker of an entire generation of young men in Hollywood's shadows. 25. Scotty Bowers, the pimp king of Hollywood. If there was anyone who knew exactly who slept with whom in Golden Age Hollywood, it was Scotty Bowers. A former Marine, he became the unofficial central hub for the carnal needs of an entire industry, starting from a Richfield gas station on Hollywood Boulevard. From 1946, at that gas station, Scotty didn't just pump fuel, he also introduced young men to VIP clients. Many were aspiring actors, unknown models, or even recently discharged soldiers. In his memoir, Full Service 2012, he recalled Rock Hudson, Carrie Grant, Spencer Tracy. They were all clients. And me, I was just the go-between. Scotty claims to have arranged over 1,000 encounters over 30 years, personally participating in more than a third of them. They came to me because they had no other choice. They needed a role, needed rent money, needed to survive. He was never sued, never caught on tape. And when he passed away in 2019, Scotty left behind an archive of hundreds of big names, people who had once lain down, just for the chance to stand on screen. 26. Spencer Tracy, the silver screen legend and the backstage secret of his homosexuality. Spencer Tracy, the man with a resolute gaze and a voice that drew people in, was once an untouchable icon of Hollywood. He captivated audiences with powerful, intelligent performances, and his on-screen romance with Katharine Hepburn became the stuff of legend. But behind that heroic image lay a secret once leaked from the backstage of a film set that sent shockwaves through Hollywood: the story of Tracy's sexual orientation. According to the account of a lighting assistant who had worked with him in the 1940s, it all began during a late-night shoot at the MGM lot. After the crew had left, Tracy lingered in a corner of the backstage area with a young supporting actor. They stood very close together, speaking quietly, then disappeared into the props room, the man recounted. When they came out, the young man's hair was tousled, his shirt buttons misaligned, and Spencer was smiling as if he had just completed a perfect scene. That story might have remained just an in-house rumor until a makeup artist was fired for carelessly mentioning at a party that Mr. Tracy had a taste for men rather than women. The rumor spread quickly to the point where a tabloid was preparing to publish it, but the studio blocked the move by threatening to sue and releasing counterclaims. Spencer Tracy never publicly addressed his private life yet. In the shadowed corners of Hollywood's backstage, the story continued to be whispered, like a secret that would never fade even long after the stage lights had gone dark. It turns out that the male idols who once made millions of hearts flutter also had moments when they had to trade away themselves in the shadows just to seize a chance to appear in front of the camera. The question is, has this truly come to an end? Or is it still happening only in ways that are more subtle, more discreet, and even more dangerous than before? What do you think about the truth hidden behind the stage lights? If given the choice, would you live true to yourself or sacrifice everything in exchange for fame? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe to the channel today and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the upcoming stories.